All right, let's just jump right in. Welcome to this explainer where we're going to unpack the crazy, cyclical fracture of Africa's absolute biggest music duo, P-Square. If you've been following the massive Afrobeats explosion over the last couple of decades, you definitely know their name. But today, we're actually going to look past all those chart-topping hits in the sold-out stadiums. Instead, we're diving into the structural and legal data to really examine the anatomy of a double breakup. I mean, how exactly does a musical powerhouse absolutely shatter, put the pieces all back together, and then somehow shatter all over again? Let's get into it. It really is the ultimate question, isn't it? Why did Africa's biggest music duo walk away twice? We're looking at this massively successful family business that built a literal empire, only to watch it collapse. Not just once, but two completely separate times. When we look at the data, the news reports, and the actual legal filings, a super fascinating story emerges. It's a story that proves, without a doubt, that raw talent isn't always enough to keep a corporate structure intact, especially when complex family dynamics are in the mix. So here is how we're going to map all this out. First, we'll look at their initial rise and management structure. Next, we'll break down that infamous 2017 breakup. Then, we'll cover their solo eras leading up to the big 2021 reunion, followed by their most recent legal battles. And finally, we'll look at their public statements and where they currently stand today. All right, starting with Section 1, the rise and management structure. Their immense rise to success wasn't just about Peter and Paul Koyo. It was actually this deeply intertwined family affair built on a solid three-pillar structure. You had the twins, right? They were the face and the raw talent, while their older brother, Judo Koye, operated as the managerial backbone of the whole operation. For years, this tightly knit family corporate structure really fueled their total dominance across the continent. They successfully handled everything from massive endorsement deals to huge international stadium tours. But as we often see, tightly knit structures can sometimes create the most intense friction. Which brings us to Section 2, the 2017 Breakup Explained. So, looking at the sources, the 2017 breakup wasn't just some sudden, petty sibling argument over a song. It was a literal, step-by-step breakdown of that core management structure we just talked about. Step 1 was rooted in some deep management disagreements, specifically regarding Jude's overarching power as manager, the transparency of how revenue was being split, and overall creative control. This friction naturally bled directly into Step 2, which was a complete structural breakdown, where the brothers literally couldn't agree on the fundamental direction of the company anymore. And that ultimately resulted in Step 3, the highly publicized 2017 split. Basically, the corporate entity of P-Square completely ceased to function because that management triangle had entirely collapsed. Moving right along to Section 3, solo careers to the 2021 reunion. At this point, the P-Square entity was essentially frozen in time. Fans were forced to follow two completely divergent paths. You had Peter operating as Mr. P and Paul as Rude Boy. And the thing to understand here is that they weren't just solo acts. They were now entirely divided corporate entities. This meant they each had to go out and build entirely new management teams, legal frameworks, and distinct musical identities totally from scratch. It really goes to show just how foundational that original three-pillar structure was to their day-to-day operations. But of course, the timeline didn't end there. We got a highly publicized reunion in 2021 that finally brought P-Square back together. And the cultural reaction was absolutely massive. I mean, the internet practically broke. Streaming numbers completely surged, and they quickly went back to selling out enormous arenas. It offered this brief, shining glimmer of hope to both fans and the industry that the structural and business issues from 2017 had finally been ironed out. It really seemed like they had figured out a new corporate framework that would allow them to successfully coexist. Unfortunately, that takes us to Section 4, recent disputes and legal battles. This part is so fascinating because there's this really sharp contrast between the emotional dynamics and the cold, hard legal reality. While the public just sees twin brothers with a lifelong bond, official registries like Nigeria's Corporate Affairs Commission, or the CAC, well, they see asset division, corporate filings, and legal liabilities. When a family dispute happens at this elite level, it doesn't just play out at the family dinner table. It plays out in boardroom negotiations, financial audits, and official corporate paperwork. The recent separation is anchored in some very specific legal and business developments. We are seeing major disputes over those CAC filings. Specifically, there are allegations that a new, entirely separate company was secretly floated to divert royalties and shared assets away from the core P-Square entity. We're seeing renewed disagreements on the overall business structure. And honestly, Echoing the ghosts of 2017, we're seeing fresh clashes over management control involving financial audits. This just proves that this second split is highly structural, deeply rooted in allegations of misappropriated funds and some very complex corporate mechanics.
And that leads us to our final part, Section 5, Public Statements and Current Status.
The source materials we're looking at, which range from their official Instagram accounts to major outlets like Premium Times, Vanguard, and Channels TV, point to a very clear trail of contrasting public statements. We're seeing direct communications from Peter, Paul, and Jude that track a really rapid escalation of the conflict. It's kind of wild because their social media platforms have essentially become these weaponized press rooms for a corporate divorce. Whenever the legal negotiations seem to stall behind closed doors, the dispute aggressively spills right over into the public domain. I mean, if you read through the recent open letters from the brothers, the public narrative perfectly mirrors the deepening rift in their business operations. On one hand, you have Peter issuing these extensive statements accusing his brother of constantly disrespecting his talent, while explicitly alleging that Jude diverted funds into a secret shell company. Then, on the other side, you have Paul claiming that Peter went so far as to actually petition Nigeria's Economic and Financial Crimes Commission against him. The language they're using here isn't just about hurt feelings, It's about unauthorized actions, government investigations, and deep structural betrayal totally cementing their currently separated status. So ultimately, when you consider the cyclical nature of this double breakup, from the original management disputes of 2017 all the way to the current financial and CAC filing battles of today, we really have to ask, what is the ultimate cost of mixing family and business at the absolute highest levels of the music industry? When family dynamics and corporate governance intertwine at this massive multi-million-dollar scale, is a structural collapse simply inevitable? It's a truly fascinating case study in business management, and one that definitely leaves us wondering if the P-Square empire will ever find a foundation strong enough to last. Thanks so much for joining me on this explainer, and I'll catch you next time.